Hi, my name is Jessica O'Sullivan, and I'm going to talk a little bit about nationalism and what that is. And nationalism is that you feel pride in your nation, your heritage, your language, your culture. And there are positive things with nationalism. For example, you might display your national symbols by waving your flag around, singing the national anthem, or maybe participating in national holidays and celebrations. It's something that a lot of people do who belong to a specific country or live in a specific country. You might take part in those national holidays and celebrations. Nationalism can also be demonstrated by supporting policies or leaders that are seen as helping the nation's interest. Nationalism often um, emphasizes the importance of national identity, language, and culture. And this is something that I can relate to as an immigrant to the United States. I grew up in Sweden and I lived in Sweden until I was almost 30 years old. And I still, after 20 years in the United States, I still feel a strong pride in my Swedish language, my Swedish culture, and my Swedish identity. Because it's part of my childhood, it's part of my upbringing, and it's still something that I carry in my heart. Nationalism, though, if it becomes extreme, and the negative side of nationalism can be that you start to fear or hate others, immigrants, for example, minorities, the ones who don't fit into your narrow box of what your nation is, what your nation stand for. And this is something we have seen through history. One clear cut extreme example of this is what happened during World War II with the Holocaust, for example. But we've also seen this in the Soviet Union, in many other nations through history, where those who don't fit into the national narrative get mistreated, or they might be put into camps or in prison and treated harshly. Another negative side of nationalism is that you see your nation, your cultural identity, your national identity as better, and that you are allowed to expand into other nations, for example, or you see other nations as threat. And this is something we also saw during World War II when the Nazis considered their race, the German race, the Aryan race, as they called it, as better and superior to other races, and therefore they needed more space to expand, which led to that Nazi Germany invaded almost all of Europe at one point. We also have seen this as through the Cold War, for example, and also recently with Russia, who invaded Ukraine. And they see that they're almost like a threat, or that they see part of the Ukrainian nation as belonging to Russia. Also, something we see in nationalism, extreme negative nationalism, is that if anyone criticizes the nation, they are seen as unpatriotic or traitors. And this can lead to that people lose their ability to speak out. Because if you do speak out, you will be prosecuted, you might be executed, you might lose your job, and so on. And it might be political opponents, but it also often, journalists, authors, artists, anyone who dares to speak out against the regime often gets hurt. We saw this, for example, in Chile when Pinochet took power there. His regime imprisoned and executed anyone who dared to stand up and speak out. And this is something we've seen through history overall. I also want to talk about race biology, or what is called scientific racism. And this is something that often is combined with nationalism. So race biology is, the people who sort of came up with race biology saw this as the scientific. And they said that you could classify people into races depending on how they looked. So they would look at people's skin color, measure their skull shape, and their noses, as we can see in this picture here. And not only that they divide them into different races, they also said that depending on what race you belong to, that would influence your intelligence, morality, and your behavior too. And then they valued that. So certain races were valued higher than others. So it starts in the 1700s with scientists who start to categorize humans into different races. And here we see an image, an example of this, and they most of the time put the European race on the top, and then it was classifications, and as I said, they certain behavior, certain intelligence was connected to what race you belong to. And this is something they did by using science as they saw it. Science is amazing, but sometimes science, or the scientific method, I should say, does things that are not morally correct. But thankfully, science can change. That's the whole part with science. With new discoveries, science change. During the 18th century, or the 1800s, the 19th century, race biology become more powerful, more influential. And it developed into the thought that certain people should just not exist, and that other races were more biological superiors. And all these thoughts, already in the 1700s, were used to justify colonialism and slavery and discrimination against certain groups. And it was the Europeans who brought their thought of race biology or scientific racism with them to other countries and justified treating the people who lived in those areas harshly. Sweden, where I'm from, had a very large race institute, as they call it, the Swedish Race Institute, where they traveled all around Sweden, measuring people's skulls, their noses, and they categorized them. And here, these pictures are from the Swedish Race Institute, and the people to the right on the screen, for me at least, you see there are two young people with hats or caps, and the men underneath, they are considered to be pure Swedes, and because of that, they're also considered to be better. The other people, the other four pictures, two of the same woman and then two men, they are considered to be less, that they are not as superior, they are inferior to the pure Swedish race. This was not just in Sweden, it was also done in the United States. It's something that the Nazis really picked up and used to justify what they did during World War II. It's still around today, that people judge others depending on what race they belong to, even though we humans are so similar to each other that you can barely say that they're different races except for the human race. So if you might not be able to read what it says underneath the pictures, but on the pictures to the right with the young people with hats, underneath their pictures, it says student from Gotland, that Gotland is an island outside Sweden, lady student, Swedish scientist, and manufacturer. That's all it says about them. On the other side, it says of the woman on the top, it says, a woman of manly type, socially of low standing. The men underneath, one of them says, workman, strongly race mixed of Finnish type. And then the last one says gypsy, which was a word that was commonly used for Romani people. So it says gypsy with Finnish blood, criminal. So they put a lot of judgment into these classifications, which led to them, for example, forced sterilization, and that people were even put into mental institutions, for example, and that there were laws made that gave certain groups of people less rights. This was used a lot. Race biology and nationalism often go hand in hand. Not positive nationalism when you're just proud of your country and wave a flag around, but when you consider your nation, your cultural identity, your language better and superior to others. And this is something we still see today in the world. It hasn't gone away, even though we today see the dangers of it. And when we have to be careful. We have to be careful and don't hide behind saying, oh, they're just proud of their country. Oh, they're just, waving the flag around, which is totally fine. But when the pride of your country comes with judgment and hate and fear of others, that's when it becomes dangerous. And these forces are still around. Many people thought that after World War II, that, the Holocaust was so horrible, World War II was so horrible, 60 million people died during World War II. Over 6 million Jewish people died in the Holocaust. And they think somewhere between 10 and 15 million people died in the Holocaust, including Romani, people of color, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and people they called antisocial and so on. Many people thought that after World War II, that this would never, ever creep out again, that this was gone. But it's not. It's still around. And we have to be careful to not let it grow stronger. Because if it grows stronger, you never know what's going to happen. And I think that a lot of people live with a false illusion. Well, all illusions are false, but that they would somehow be safe. No one is safe under extreme nationalism. And no one is safe if race biology or scientific racism grows stronger. Because the people in power, if they feel that you are a threat, it doesn't matter how nationalistic you feel. If you belong to the correct race or the correct culture as they see it, if the people in power see you as a threat, you will be prosecuted. So we have to keep our eyes open and be careful to not let these forces become stronger again. Thank you for listening. If you have any thoughts or questions, please leave a comment.